Hello, everyone. Despite polling suggesting that this will be the closest election in American history, the choice for president has never been more clear than it is right now in this election. Putting aside just Donald Trump's unconscionable character and lack of moral compass, it's so hard to imagine, but his policies are actually worse than his personality. So the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy individually collected data from both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's policy proposals, and the results couldn't be more separated from one another. This is what either a Harris or Trump presidency will look like for you, your family, and your pocketbook. So just to throw this out there, this is a neutral and unbiased research organization that tracks tax policies and how much more or less you will pay annually in taxes. If Donald Trump gets elected and puts his disastrous across-the-board tariff policy into effect, if you make between $0 and $28,600 a year and are within the lowest 20% of Americans, you will become even more poorer and struggle even more to pay the bills with a 4.9% tax increase, which is $790 additional dollars every year. What about the rest? Well, it only gets worse from here, actually. If you make anywhere between $28,600 to $55,100, guess what? Your taxes are going up by 3.6% based on Donald Trump's abysmal economic policy and across-the-board tariffs, which, by the way, is an additional $1,430 every year. If you make anywhere between $55,100 and $94,100, congratulations, you will pay 2.1% more in taxes under Trump, which equates to about $1,530 additional cash per year. Next up, if you make anywhere between $94,100 and $157,500 a year, unfortunately for you, you get to pay more by voting for Trump with an increase of 2% in taxes. Next, if you have an income of $157,500 and $360,000, you will pay about 0.8% more in taxes. But guess what? There's some good news for you. Well, only if you're in the richest 5% of Americans, which you most likely aren't, because if you make $360,000 to almost $1 million a year, you will get an annual decrease in taxes by 1.2% and pay about $7,160 less. And lastly, under Donald Trump, if you are in the category of the 1% richest Americans and make over $914,900 a year, then you get to pay $36,320 less a year. So Donald Trump's philosophy is continue the failed trickle-down economics. But unlike every single Republican president, if you're not within the 1% richest Americans, you will actually pay more in taxes instead of just paying the same, while billionaires get tax breaks. Yes, Donald Trump is doubling down on the already horrible trickle-down economics, and somehow, just somehow, he managed to get even worse than George W. Bush. So in essence, 95% of Americans who are already struggling will face higher taxes under Donald Trump, while the richest 5%, who literally do not work anymore because they don't need to, get even more in tax cuts. I cannot even overemphasize this. It cannot be overstated. The average American who works laboriously and formidably every single day just to make ends meet, if Donald Trump is elected, will get a big old orange criminal to bend over and shit all over them. But he'll sure make sure to give big old tax breaks to himself and his kids and Elon Musk and all of these other impenetrably rich freeloaders, and they'll get to pay less in taxes than they do already per year. But what about Kamala Harris's economic policies? And what does that mean for you and your taxes? Well, quite the exact opposite, actually. Conversely, 95% of Americans will pay less in taxes, and the 5%, the top 5%, will actually pay their fair share under Kamala Harris, instead of becoming more rich like they would if Trump is elected again. So if you make anywhere from $0 to $28,600 under a Harris presidency, you will pay 7% less in taxes annually. If you make anywhere from $28,600 to $55,100 a year, you will still pay less with a reduction of 3.8 in taxes. Next up, if you pay anywhere between $55,100 to $94,100 a year, you will see a 2.7% decrease in annual taxes. Next up, if you make anywhere between $94,100 and $157,500 a year, you will still have to pay less in taxes with a 1.8% decrease. If you make anywhere between $200,000 a year and $360,000 a year, you get a 1.4% tax break. And even if you managed to make a whopping $360,000 to $914,900 a year, because Kamala Harris is the generous person she is, you will still pay less in taxes by 0.7% than what you currently do. And lastly, the richest 1%, anyone making over $914,900 a year, will pay more in taxes by only 4.1%. Keep in mind, this is the people who are already rich as fuck. And in my opinion, I actually think they should pay a whole hell of a lot more than just 4.1%. This is being so courteous, and she could very easily make it more. Listen, there is a reason why 400 plus economists and high-ranking former U.S. policymakers have endorsed Kamala Harris in this year's election, because they know that her economic policies will boost the economy and make it more fair for everyone, while Donald Trump will just keep handing out more money and tax breaks to the richest 5% and will cause great hardship on the rest of us. Even Elon Musk, one of Trump's most avid supporters, has admitted this himself.
We have to reduce spending to live within our means. That necessarily involves some temporary hardship, but it will ensure long-term prosperity.
Get out and vote. For God's sakes, do not elect Donald Trump. Elect someone who very markedly cares about the average American in the middle class of our country, and that is Kamala Harris.